Hello.
Hi. Hi, Trevor.
Hello, how's it going?
Great. You?
Not too bad. Just starting the day off with releasing a security advisory.
Hello, hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Hello. How's everyone doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
Got coffee. I'm good. I am good now. Definitely need coffee. Hi, Sahij. Hi, Yakov.
Hello.
How are things?
Hello.
Very well.
Great. Happy Wednesday. And the day has been going well for all?
Yeah.
It's almost done over here.
Yeah, I know. How is the future? I was going to ask.
I wish I knew.
Yeah, that's it. You've already had a very full workday in, I'm sure. So yeah, it's a fun time for these meetings.
Oops. I might have to drop off and then rejoin in a sec.
Sounds great. Hi, Rob.
Hey guys.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. And hello, Benji.
Hey folks.
How's it going?
Yeah, not going too bad, thanks. How's it going with everyone else?
Doing well, thanks.
Hey. The old AV problems as you turn on. There we go.
The joys of Zoom in particular, yes. Hello,
Hi.
Ivan.
Do you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, because I don't hear anybody else.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Yeah, sorry, my background, it's like silence. So yeah, right now I'm trying to stand during like every meeting and every option I have. So sorry about I'm wait for a couple minutes. Give me a second to open agenda and we can start. And thanks. I think Sahat, thanks for adding agenda for rest of the year. And yeah. And also big thanks to Rob, who I created agenda for that meeting, particular meeting. Yeah, so we're ready to start. I will send link to agenda in the chat, so we're all on the same page. Yeah, so first thing, we will go through agenda quickly. First thing is if somebody watching and want to join, and especially joining for the first time, please sign a participation guidelines, membership agreement, a code of conduct. You can sign it as individual. If you're watching it on YouTube and want to join the next one, please there is a link in agenda document, so it's just a couple of clicks. So next one is introduction of attendees, and we will go in the same order as in agenda files. Hi, my name is Ivan, and Rob, you next.
Hi, Rob. First Dibs working on defer and stream.
Yakov, you the next. Maybe you unmute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hi. Hope you can hear me with this new microphone.
We can hear you.
Hey folks, I'm Benji. This is my first GraphQL.js working group.
Exciting.
I'm Trevor from Apollo, also my first GraphQL.js working group.
Also exciting.
Hi, I'm Sahaj. I'm from the guild.
Hi, I'm Hugh, also from Apollo.
So let's start, and it's cool that it's more people at this meeting. We still fit a Zoom screen. We still have 2 more people to have 3 by 3. But the more people, the better. So a better discussion, quality discussion. So review agenda items. So today we have couple agenda items. I think 3, but all of them are kind of big, and we have 1 hour. So, and actually it's perfectly fitting. So 15, and 20, it's 15 minutes, and yeah, we kind of on the schedule. Anybody else want to add anything or reschedule or move before we start discussing them?
I think under number 4, there's something here about defer stream that is a copy paste mistake from the last meeting. I think.
Okay.
I think I missed that when I created the agenda.
Oh, no worries. So yeah, we will skip this one. Especially since yeah, so some of action items, I think. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what particular one was on the previous one, because we have long-standing one. And actually, a good thing, it was also, I think it was also action items. Thanks to Benji, now we have security policy through all the projects. So I think we discussed having security policy on GraphQL.js, and we didn't feel it as a topic, but yeah, we had it. So yeah, security bug reports. So I think I need to check like security. It's actually from you. So can you check if you like that issue? Can you check like security document provided by Benji, and if it satisfies you, can you please close it? Or we can add like additional stuff. Hopefully we will have like policy for entire project, for the project and the foundation, and it will be the same. So let's start. Any other action item update from anybody else before we start discussing async iteratable? No. So let's start from async iteratable, and Rob, it's your topic. So
Yeah, so I think it's agreed on that having the ability for resolvers to return async iterables would be a prerequisite for supporting the stream directive. So I have a pull request for that I've had open for a while. And there was some discussion about how we would handle returning multiple results from the resolvers. 1 second, I'll share my screen with the discussion topic. Yeah, so what I have implemented right now is basically this option A, where you return an async iterable from the resolver that yields individual values, and those values get processed by the rest of the GraphQL execution. It was proposed, should we return list of values? And there was some discussion on that, where I think both Ivan and Benji had proposed that we should maybe support yielding individual values, but have some way of indicating to the executor that here is a batch of results, potentially with some kind of symbol or something, but probably with a helper function in GraphQL.js that would handle the implementation details. So I was thinking, does that mean that we are not blocked anymore and we can move forward with option A and work out the details of the batch portion in the future?
So I think it's more question to Yakov, because as I remember, Yakov, you was disagreeing with idea of having some wrapper or some like specific way to indicate batching. If you like okay with by default like single item by default, it's mean like it's not block. If not, we need to discuss it. So what's your opinion? It's the same or?
I mean, I think I personally favor just keeping the signature with just one form, meaning with an array of single items, but I don't really have strong feelings about it. I wonder if everyone or if anyone has an intuition as to which is faster, meaning meaning in general, like or sorry, what overheads there would be in the two paths, meaning for single items, my route would involve the client always wrapping them in an array, and then be assumed it doesn't have to be checked whether they need to be unwrapped, but they do need to be unwrapped and iterated through. The other way is, it has to be checked whether they're a single item or an array. I don't know if it's obvious which one. I don't know if that's an obvious concern in terms of speed. In my mind, I doubt that that'll cause, that speed difference is an issue. So I'm sort of discounting that. And I just think it's simpler with one, but, again, I don't have strong feelings about it. And I agree with Rob that it's kind of time to advance this one way or the other. So if there's strong feelings the other way, then it's okay with me.
Yeah, I provide some context because I like personally disagree with the idea of the return by one. Just to document this discussion, I need to catch up because as I understand, after merging rob PR, we still need to continue it and figure out a way. Basically, why I think we need to support like async iteratable with one item. It's because it's like JavaScript primitive. We already have this in subscription, and if you have like third-party library for doing something that return async iteratable, or if you like, basically it's like it's not for performance, because for performance actually Yakov's approach is it's simple, so you don't need to do a check, but my concern is like developer experience. So for me, it's like weird if you can return async iteratable in subscription, but not in like as a usual field. Plus, with particular feature, to put in context, this particular PR is not stream and defer specific. It enables stream and defer, but can be used without stream and defer, and there is valid use cases for using it without stream and defer. And for this other use case, valid use case beyond stream and defer, for them, like batching doesn't make sense.
Well, I would stop you there. I think it does make sense, because every time, you need the algorithm needs to step through, it's better to have, not to go back to the event loop, it's better to have whatever results. It's always better to do batch.
There is like
when huge batches block the event loop. I mean, that's a separate problem.
Yeah, this is exactly a problem that people voiced over, and I think a iteratable solution to that problem. People voiced a problem if you have like big array, and at the top of the query, so you block an event loop for a long time. Yeah, but yeah.
Right, but here we let them batch how they want to batch. I mean, they decide, what the length of the batch is. Meaning, anyway, I'm not sure you were done. I just wanted to interject there because it is very relevant even before the first streams.
Yeah, so I think
again, I don't have strong opinions on it. So
my idea is basically to support native JavaScript. If native JavaScript supports like async iteratable one, and batching is performance optimization, we need to support like basic thing. And if people plus a second concern is like error messages. If we return async iteratable for list of lists, or like some nested list thing field, so it's like errors can be like very interesting. Yeah, but in any case, since like we're now in alpha stage, and there is like not a strong opinion, we can merge this thing and work on a wrapper. And even if we later like continue basically discussion, just not to block Rob, because I think Rob for a long time he's rebasing 3 PRs. First one about benchmark. I had some concerns about it. That's why I like changed benchmark a lot recently, yesterday. So now I'm sure like Rob, your changes of doing adding await is not changing anything. It's like safe to merge because yeah. And this is second PR about async iteratable, and yeah, so I think like core issue we're discussing right now is unblocking Rob, and since we have like RC phase,
Ivan, I don't think that makes sense. Meaning if we're basically, if we merge this PR, then we're going to have to support it. I know we're in alpha, but we're not going to go back and unsupport it before it gets released. I mean, we're essentially, or at least it wouldn't be efficient. Meaning, if we can just decide right now that to unblock Rob and to just go for it on the merits. I mean, I don't think anyone else is really.
Yeah, like basically, I'm saying like if you don't have strong opinion and if everybody else agree on supporting like two styles, we can merge like styles like simple version and merge performance optimization as second PR. And I actually think we can change stuff. Same with like reverting, like deprecation removal or any other changes. It's like experimentation phase in a sense to figure out and to get feedback. Because actually stream defer is not technically stage 2 and we like planning to do some changes.
Again, this is not related to stream and defer. This is just
I agree. But we can treat this as also experimental feature to get feedback on. If you do performance benchmarking and finding out like there is huge difference in this checking this is it array or not, we can change it.
Again, I think if we're merging it now, someone could take it and decide to backport it to B15, and we should just be comfortable saying like coming to terms with it. Meaning, does anyone else have an opinion on it? I think we could just say we're comfortable with it. That this is the best path forward to support both versions. I mean, does anyone else have any opinions?
Yeah, it sounds like we're comfortable with it. Yeah.
Any other concerns from anybody about this thing with async iteratable proposal, supporting async iteratable? I say like, yeah, I say like, I had one concern about performance, but since I'm like finally, and previously it was hard to measure performance, but I improved benchmark a lot. So now we can really measure performance. So answer a question. I didn't run an updated version yet on a like async iteratable. If there is no performance degradation for existing cases, I'm like for it. And let's please everybody like review PR because yeah, it's like I think we have this PR for a long time and there is like some rebases and changes and we can do final read before merging. But basically, yeah, I think it's ready to merge. Let's wait like a day and have everybody a chance to review it. I reviewed it like half a year ago or something. I need to like re-review it to see like if rebases and everything is okay.
PR is almost 2 years old.
Yeah.
Oh,
August
yeah.
25th. Yeah.
So
2020.
One thing, please, Rob, please don't cause this discussion about async iteratable and batching. I think because it is still relevant even after the merge. Your PR discussion should stay.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah.
Just my goal was to unblock this because if we all agree that we want to support single async interval of single values, then there's no reason to block it further on the details of how we handle the batching. But we definitely should figure out those details.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, like if somebody wants to make it easier on Rob by championing with particular sub feature, I think like feel free to take it on you to prototype like wrappers or using JavaScript symbols or any other mechanism to do with wrappers. I think it can be done in parallel with like all stream defer thing. Anything else from anybody on this topic before we move into next one? No. So yeah, I wanted actually to prepare to this one, and I didn't prepare slides, but I will try to explain you, and maybe I will send some links into a chat so we're on the same page.
Mhm.
So we had this issue. About yeah. Jakub helped me and answered a bunch of like issues on GitHub. So now it's like harder to find discussions. Yeah, but it's a good thing that more things get answered. So we had like this discussion background. So basically, I want to generalize this issue, but let's start from this issue in particular. I think like in early days of GraphQL.js, 2016 or 17, it was added, some experimental feature was added by Facebook to specifically to support some experimentation inside the Facebook. And plus it was clearly marked as experimental and you should not use it, and it's only for experimental schemas. Yeah. So later I marked it as deprecated here, and like original description. I agree with feedback from Sahaj and others. Like, not everybody should go through Git blame. So I need to have like better description on PRs, and I'm working on it. So like all the latest PRs have like significantly bigger description, and all of them have description. So I sent the last one, and it's show like original description. So that feature was added to support non-spec compliant base as a Facebook experiment years ago. I spent like every year or so before next release, I think Facebook guys asking to remove it as part of removing all Facebook legacy, specific Facebook legacy stuff. And yeah, I tried to remove it now and find out that it's actually used by Jakub to implement non-spec compliant feature. So it's not a question of API used for like speed up things, API used for like something caching or some like optimization of some valid use, like some use case in that fit GraphQL spec. It's a question of supporting non-spec compliant things. And specifically non-spec compliant things that is not under experimental flag, is not like active RFC proposal. And I personally think it's why I want to generalize it, because like from time to time we have the same discussion with people. So people want to have like a hook to support some non-standard thing. For example, another similar thing is before we switch to another example and why I want to generalize it. Do you have any question about this particular one, about removing this function, or is it like situation is clear? Okay, so I assume it's clear. So another big example, we have like different SDL syntax as experiment. So initially Lee supported description as comments, and it was in that form for years. until like later he actually changed it, like as part of experiment, he changed it into doc strings that we have now. And for a period of time, we actually supported that, I think like 3 years. And we finally removed it, but people still want to use it, and they still want like to have like API to do non-spec compliant things. The same from time to time, there is like other issues like fully support, like add new like symbols to Elixir. So I'm personally for having a policy on that, because every time we have like this one discussion, like not in some cases not, but in other cases we have like one discussion for supporting something is not spec compliant. And for me, answer is clear. If it's like not, we are reference implementation of specification, and it's okay to provide some like customization or stuff, but provide features specifically and support them specifically to implement non-spec compliant code base. I'm like against it, especially since we have RFC process and we have like canary builds and we have other mechanisms. I'm like in favor of like just saying, if the only use case for that feature is support non-spec compliant thing, we should not add this feature, and we should remove like this kind of hacks we already have. But asterisk here, if something is used for like have valid use case, but can also be used to support non-spec compliant things, it will remain. So for example, if it's performance optimization or if it's something else. So what do you think about that? Should we like have a feature specifically to support not things outside of a spec, and that it's outside of a RFC process?
You've effectively got two things here, right? You've got supporting, as you say, the RFC process, and you've got supporting other people that aren't using the RFC process but want to make non-spec compliant changes. So personally, I'm all in favor of saying, no, it's the reference implementation. It implements the GraphQL spec. Everything that we put into GraphQL.js, as we know, some of the other languages literally just copy that and translate it into the other languages. And we shouldn't need to support that. We shouldn't need them to have to support that. If people want to do that, the GraphQL library itself is MIT licensed, so they can go ahead and fork it and do that. I would say maybe have a policy of, if it's a RFC 1, then it's okay to have the changes in. But if it's not in an RFC process, if it's not reached RFC 1 yet, then we don't add it to GraphQL.js. That's my opinion.
Small like addition to your comment, and I send it in the chat. It's like a reason why I'm also against it, because people copy this particular feature, have like big commands saying you should not use it. It's experimental and other disclaimers, but it still get copied to Python implementation, Go implementation, Perl, and Lua implementation, even though it was like clearly marked as like something you should not copy. So yeah, I don't want to influence discussion, just wanted to emphasize your Benja's argument.
Just for this particular one, this could be deprecated in a minor and removed in V17 if you chose to do that.
Yeah,
maybe you're not trying to move that quickly. I'm not sure. But.
Yeah, it's what happened. So it was deprecated, I think, like half a year ago.
Yeah. So I'll just chime in here. I mean, my opinion, to those who read the thread, is clear, but to those maybe not actively following, is maybe and listening to this recording later, maybe many years from now, that the GitHub is no longer available. So I just want to point out some context, and because I think it's important to the discussion. Ivan is talking about a broad policy and couching it in terms of examples that aren't, carefully couching it, I think appropriately so, in terms of examples that aren't, about improving the speed and, totally custom behavior. And I think it's important to realize that that could be happening. That's actually not what happened in the original case, not this time, nor the last time this came up, which was in terms of customizing execution. Both times it was a discussion of something that we could call not RFC 1, not RFC 0, but RFC, sort of pre-RFC 0, in which last time was talking about customizing execution to work on a version of defer and stream that could be later further optimized to support schema stitching. That hasn't worked out just in terms of my time and bandwidth. And here we're talking about the addition of a new introspective directive that could certainly be submitted as an RFC. That's what it's actually used for in GraphQL Executor. And I think it's important to realize, because Benji was talking about, we want to support the RFC process, and we can also talk about people customizing things outside of the RFC process. And Ivan mentioned that we might want to use these hooks later for people that want to experiment, in something that's being actively explored. What I think it's important to realize, it's the same hook that we're talking about. Meaning, let's say later, 6 weeks from now, or 3 days from now, or next year, somebody wants to submit an RFC where we provide experimental support for a custom meta field. It's the same exact hook that would need to be brought back. Meaning, so the hook itself provides access, a way for that custom behavior to be injected, but the hook is not anything that violates the spec. The existence of the hook lets someone violate the spec, but they certainly don't have to. It gets copied into other implementations, which is true. Not every language, I suppose, put the hooks in that customization. Does that workflow make sense? I think that's not really on the GraphQL.js reference implementation to outlaw. And the hook says it's deprecated, you should never need to use it. It's not marked as, specifically as something that should not be copied into other languages. And even if it is copied into other languages, I don't know, sitting, where I am basically in the JavaScript world, that hook wouldn't be helpful in other languages also. So that's the first point, that the existence of lots of hooks lets the experimental process and the pre-RFC process, where a lot of people, want to easily experiment, to make sure that things are working in the broader ecosystem. That's one point. Second point is in terms of what Benji mentioned about forking GraphQL.js and providing something that's not spec compliant. There is a broader, JavaScript ecosystem that's built around GraphQL.js, and GraphQL.js cannot be easily forked. And the reason why is because it doesn't provide, or to my understanding, I could be wrong, is that GraphQL.js does not provide like a TypeScript signature that's interoperable with any other thing. It provides classes, and it has instance of checks that will fail if you're not exactly the same instance. And I'm not gonna. We could talk a little bit, maybe at a separate meeting or in terms of a separate issue, a separate discussion, whether that's a good thing or it's a bad thing. But practically speaking, GraphQL.js cannot be easily forked, nor do I think it would be good for the ecosystem for it to be forked. I think it would be very bad, actually, for the ecosystem. And I think it's important for us, to realize, sitting here today, this is a GraphQL Foundation project. It's meant to be the reference implementation. It's meant to support the reference implementation. It's meant to support the spec and support changes to the spec, and it's meant to serve as a boilerplate to other languages. But GraphQL.js is also, a production-ready GraphQL runtime, and it's used that way. It's used that way by many companies, some of whom are represented here, and some of whom, are not, and maybe don't care. or maybe have their own implementations. Could be. But it's very important to the broader ecosystem as a whole, and it's the ability to hook into that pipeline is broad. And so I think taking those two issues together, when you have hooks like this that don't violate the spec but just allow access to experimentation and to other users to customize, but are not per se against anything. They could be used in spec compliant ways or for research ways. There's no reason to actively search them out and destroy, just remove them. And I think there should be better ways to customize the existing ways. Now we have a few ways of customizing. It's been decided that the general way of customizing things is to export them as a class, and so you can override methods. And in some cases, that is actually a better way of customizing because then you have access. You don't have to customize in a real place. It's more elegant. But I think basically we should be providing as hooks as appropriate, and certainly not where they interfere with what the reference implementation is trying to do. We shouldn't be bending over backwards and making the reference implementation, worse or itself, not really demonstrating the language. But it doesn't seem to me to be fair to the overall community to abandon that second role that GraphQL.js has. And it doesn't make sense to remove a hook for things that are not, RFC 1 yet, and put it back in a couple of weeks, the same hook, for things that once they become RFC 1. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, can I clarify? So like hooks and RFC process is not, in a sense, it's not related. If you want to add top-level introspection field, you will create PR that add top-level introspection fields. So if you try to do experimentation to see if it's work, you don't need the hook. You just clone the repo and add introspection hook. If you're doing RFC 0, 1, like any RFC, you don't need the hook, you just add the introspection field. If you want to customize something in your application, experiment with your own application, you can use canary build, you can build it yourself, and use, actually, GraphQL.js is because it's peer dependency, it's ideal for experimenting in your own code bases. So you just build a package and you use your custom version as a peer dependency, where it doesn't work in one specific situation. When you want to provide experimental features in a separate library, not as like canary build, not as custom build, but as a library on top of GraphQL.js. So in that case, Yakov's arguments are fully valid because you want to have like vanilla GraphQL.js and something on top that implement non-spec compliant way. It's the only scenario where you actually need those hooks. In all other scenario, plus it should be production. In other scenarios, it's simpler and easy. If you're doing like experimenting pre-RFC or RFC, or like for simpler to just like modify source code and add it there. Only case of production library that exists outside of GraphQL.js to support non-spec compliant feature is like with use cases restricted. Anything else is possible. It's like clarification about like forking and other things. But yeah, but I don't want to like idea to bring in a GraphQL.js working group is not to have conversation between me and Jakub, because we already have this inside an issue a bunch of time. And also, I'm like, we can even split in two questions. Like, should we block adding, like, we should not add features without use case. And if person provide the use case for a feature and explicitly say, I need to implement non-spec compliant thing, should we allow it? One thing. And second question, should we, if we have a possibility to remove non-spec compliant things that this thing like similar to that one that already exists, should we remove it? We can even split like these two questions apart. What everybody else thinking, and yeah.
Do we have a sense of how many people are using this functionality right now?
So,
if any, like who's relying on it?
Yeah, so in this case, I tried to search who actually using it. It's hard because it's not a function, it's positional argument. As far as I understand, it's used only by Yakov, and he started using it when it was deprecated to support with like for field __ for field and __ directive. So like I'm like okay to have a process of removing this stuff. So it's not like next release everything is removed. I'm like for marking it deprecated and wait. So like go through a normal process of dropping this functionality. Question here is like, should it be like if something is deprecated, but somebody come up with valid use case for that particular API, it should not be removed. Question here is supporting non-spec compliant things outside of GraphQL.js as production wide. Is it valid use case or not?
Yeah, and is there an even bigger question here? And I'm sure there is, because, and this has probably been discussed in previous meetings. So sorry if I'm rehashing this, but it sounds like the even bigger question is, what is GraphQL.js' stance on hooks in general in the code base?
So I think like hooks question in general, as Yakov said, like one type of hooks, it's like, I don't know, like disable something. And if like you're completely sure that it's up to discussion. So like sometimes hooks make sense, sometimes not. But if like you have a use case that don't break a spec, there is no like easy answer. It's like pros and cons. What I want to figure out with this discussion, if like non-spec compliant thing is valid use case or not. If somebody came up with other use case for this particular function, I would either propose like alternative API or like not remove this one. But this API was explicitly added to support non-spec compliant things. And there is nobody voiced any other use case beyond support non-compliant thing. So like question here, should we have like, basically like, I like that GraphQL spec have a clear policy. What should allow and like favor no change and other policies. And it's help like a process of not having like one discussion about stuff that we agreed and steer like a project, have a clear like what's use case, what's valid use case for this project and what's not. And for me, I wanted to raise this up to start this process for GraphQL.js, where we're publicly discussing what valid use case and goals for this project and what not, and use this discussion as like opportunity to have like first one of a kind.
Yakov, if this is deprecated and removed, how much does it impact? Is this for GraphQL Executor, for example, where it would have the biggest impact?
Well, I mean, I doubt the impact would be
just there, but yeah,
would be very large at all.
Yeah.
To me, if anyone would ask me, we could go into later about my background in the community. Like, I don't represent, high-paying customers or any or any like but I come at this as an open source contributor,
Right.
meaning if this hook didn't exist, I could see myself submitting a PR for one. I could, in my mind, it's something that is important because, again, there are two roles in general. Meaning, I disagreed with the framing of this, discussion to begin with. I didn't think we should make it a global policy discussion. I thought we should talk about just the trade-offs for this hook, and maybe there's a better way that we could do things to begin with. Once Ivan wants to talk about it the other way around, which is fine. If we're talking about it the other way around, you're getting away from what would happen with this hook. If we're talking about the other way around, I think it's very important currently, and again, not really representing any major stakeholders myself, but just my opinion. It's very, very important that GraphQL.js is as functional as possible, as performant as possible in production for customers, or for users who are using it. I don't think that enabling non-spec behavior in the spec implementation is an oxymoron. I don't think it's bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with the code. I think it gets copied to other languages, and I think that's also okay. I don't think a spec implementation suffers from having a clearly labeled entry point to say, if you want to veer from the spec, here's where you would do it. If it's harming the implementation, if it's making it more difficult to express how the spec could be implemented, then by all means. But if it's usually, it shouldn't be like that, meaning having an entry point to say, okay, here's where you would, branch off to change something is actually more explanatory about how this is all implemented and how this all fits together. If it's done right. And again, I think we could talk about how the hooks could be done better, but I just strongly disagree, I guess, about the role of GraphQL.js repository, meaning the GitHub repository. It is the spec implementation. It is a GraphQL Foundation project, but it is an open source project that's currently maintained, by the community at large. If there's a clash between those two different roles, I think you can say for sure that the spec should win. But those two roles, I don't really think the roles that GraphQL just plays. One is the reference implementation, and the other is the dominant, pipeline in the JavaScript language. In this case, I don't think those two roles are really clashing at all. It's just a question, that I think Ivan is saying we should only focus on the one role in this, to answer this particular question, maybe not in general. And I don't think that's true.
Anybody else want to voice anything before we switch to another topic?
I had one more question, but I don't want to cut anyone else off, but I can wait. If nobody else has any comments, I'm just curious, how much is there a lot of maintenance headache involved right now, Ivan, by this staying in place?
So we have it was multi-year process to remove Facebook specific things from GraphQL.js.
Got it. Okay.
This particular one is small. It's actually two changes, maybe 20 lines of code across two changes. So particular thing is small. Question here is it's increased API surface, and this particular thing, we can go into details, but like, yeah, so I don't want to
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's increasing the public API service, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something that has to be supported in the long term. Yeah.
And
Okay.
like, every time we support a feature, for example, like if person using this hook, and at the same time we add new introspection field, it's not a question of updating GraphQL.js. So if you update GraphQL.js and new introspection field added and you using this hook, you will not get it. Like,
Got it.
yeah, it's like,
That's
how if you override implementation, you don't even like inherit it, you completely override it. So I didn't check your code base, but I suspect you have like list of like stuff in your, but implement the same functionality in the source code.
I mean, no, that's no. I mean, I'm just. I don't know if that's I don't know if that argument is relevant, really.
So
Not sure of the relevance. But.
Yeah, so like to not overlong, and we still have a topic from Benji. Like my proposal is like twofold. One thing we can continue discussion in that topic, and I created a new PR to separate one. It's still draft about getting same function to schema and allowing to subclass GraphQL schema if people wants. We can continue technical discussion either like in issues that Yakov opened or like in PR that I opened. And to continue and to have public discussion, long-term public asynchronous discussion about this policy, I will create a PR to add it into some kind of document, probably like development document or something else, with like text I propose to add as a policy. And we can have like long-term asynchronous discussions there.
Yeah, I think I think Yakov, you suggested this in the issue thread. This does kind of touch on both responsibilities of, I think, this working group and also the GraphQL working group. So it might be great to bring this up as a bigger topic at the working group meetings to get more people to give their input as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Meaning, I don't know if. I'm not hearing any strong opinions here. Actually, that's not true. We had an opinion from Benji also, and I guess so.
It's unchanged, by the way.
Yeah. No, I imagine.
It's a tricky one. It could go both ways, couldn't it? Because having this flexibility there and saying that GraphQL.js is also a library that can be used for experimentation and supporting these things behind the scenes and letting people use custom servers is all part of that experimentation. It's a really compelling argument to have it there for sure. But on the other hand, limiting the public API surface area that you have to support, there's definitely huge pros to that as well.
Yeah, so to be fair, I don't want to strong arm like this decision for main GraphQL working group because it's biased to a spec, as Yakov said.
Okay. Got it.
But
yeah,
I mean, I don't think. I guess I'm agreeing with you. I mean, I don't think the 8 of us here, the 6 of us with our video on, really represent the broader ecosystem. And I think the GraphQL.js, the GraphQL working group, rather than a PR, describing a text of the policy. I mean, I think that's sort of like not a bad idea in theory, but just sort of like punting the discussion that is harder to do asynchronously, and doing it. It's hard. We're doing it synchronously now, and we're and we did it asynchronously on the previous PR. I think opening up another PR is not the best way forward. I think bringing it to the working group, to the main working group, might be dispositive. I mean, I guess, they sort of represent, of which many of the people here will be going to represent, the repository and can better maybe tease out those different roles and form a policy. So I think that's what I would support as the next step. I just wouldn't want Ivan to waste your time. Like, why work on a policy that's not gathering so much attention? And maybe I'm the only stickler on this. Maybe if it's just me and
Okay.
Yeah. It sounds like we need more input, and whether that's coming from the community, whether we're outreaching, trying to get a lot of people to chime in this, or whether it's going to a larger group and getting people to be more aware of this, it sounds like we need more input either way.
I mean, well, I would say we need ways to customize things or like at least have hooks for stuff. Cause like it's kind of need like, you can't really, I mean, yeah, I get the point that you need to support spec and be spec compliant. But if you're exporting a function that may be used for like non-spec ways, but like I don't think we should be the ones deciding like it's wrong or something. Like that thing may be used for like some other purpose or something, right? Like, okay, maybe this use case was specific enough that you may not support any spec features, but like customizing GraphQL.js itself is like a pain. You can't really do anything. And it's even harder to support various different versions of GraphQL.js. So like, I think we need better ways within GraphQL.js to just customize it. Or like, at least get rid of the instance objects, because those are like the biggest ones that stop us from being able to do much more customization.
Key difference, like for me, is like, is it customization based on like, you want more performance, you want like certain features that not contradict to spec, or you want to customize it in a way that like non-spec compliant. But so a question about exporting a function, everything exported, so you can subclass things, you can.
Well, the class problem is like a bigger problem, because like now I have like that instance of with like various different versions of GraphQL, which we do run into. So there's like a bigger discussion to have, like how do we get rid of instance objects? And then customizing could depend on like, yes, their performance needs. And yes, maybe sometimes I may not like some servers, I may not be following a spec compliance, because I like validation is like an example for some use cases where like if I have like persistent operations or something, I may not be running complete validations during that step, but like doesn't mean like people don't use like persistent ops are used by everyone, right? So I do need ways to like customize the execution phase and stuff.
Yeah. So I'm not opposing like right now in validate, you can select like the rules that you apply. You can bypass any validation you want because there is assume valid. So assume valid, even like it's bypassing validation, but people have a valid, people have like use cases that spec compliant, they just want faster server startup. So I'm like for skipping, but not to, yeah, because he already disconnected and we still have a Benji topic. So Yakov, to be clear, your proposal is to actually discuss it on a working group, main working group, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, right, legally and sort of organizationally, we have two members of the TSC here, but decisions in general seem by the group made by consensus in general, of all the working group members. I mean, and I think we could really narrow it down. I mean, I've heard a lot of discussion, but basically, the main arguments that I see is in terms of the public API surface and what's required to support and the maintenance burden. I don't see anyone saying that it detracts from the reference implementation per se being a reference implementation. Meaning it doesn't. Yeah. So I mean, so that again, and I think there's that tension there between the two different things, and I think it's important to balance it, and I think the spec should win. But I think that bringing it to the main working group and just getting it over with. I don't think the process needs to be so belabored, just from my perspective, and I'm sure from your perspective also, Ivan, if we could just decide to move on to other things.
Yeah, one thing I ask you and other people on the call before we switch to one related Benji's topic is I probably like open PR anyway to clearly formulate with like policy and having it calculate. So like, for example, there is valid concern from Sahaj about like not exposing function, not allowing to use it. And I'm not mentioning that. And I think if we put it as a policy, it should be written in correct form, since people will use it long in the future. For example,
I think, yeah.
So I will open PR and I will add it to agenda to main GraphQL working group.
Great.
And please like review PR, like even if we disagree on a policy itself, we can figure out a way how to don't have collateral damage like to other things and have it clearly formulated and affecting only stuff that is intended. Especially like, yeah, policies save a lot of discussion and useful, but they should be like really, basically we're creating a law in a sense here. Yeah. So switching to you, Benji, and like one-off discussion.
Cool. Just one last thing before we move on. I think the biggest thing out of this is it would be great to actually gather some data on this. So maybe we can add like a proxy or something like that to see whether people are actually using that. I mean, for example, with the validate, if we changed the argument so that it didn't have a default, and then we just see if someone's passing something in, do a console log and say, we're thinking of removing this, report on this issue if you want to keep it, something like that. Things like that to try and gather more data to see how widespread this is. I have this issue with my open source stuff, which is I don't know whether people are using these APIs that I've added. And if I want to remove them later, I've literally no idea. There could be 0 people in the world that use it. There could be like just the one person somewhere. It could be that 10% of the user base use it. Literally don't know. It's a really challenging problem, especially if you don't want to add monitoring to your software, which obviously no thanks. But if we can do it, like push it onto them and just put a log the first time it's used, this is deprecated, we are thinking of removing it. If you don't want it removed, speak up and then leave it another 6 months and see what happens.
Yeah, it's valid. I felt like marking stuff is deprecated is enough, but I learned that TypeScript is not validating it. It's only used in VS Code, which is strange. So VS Code like warn you about using deprecated API, but no CI/CD tool I'm aware of like don't do that. So currently deprecate directive just prevent new usage, but it's not like notify people. So yeah, it's a valid proposal of improving deprecated and actually like having always discussion upfront and not have like back and forth on deprecated API. Yeah, it's valid. It's valid side way of this discussion. Yeah, I'm for adding deprecation warnings to deprecate stuff that we have.
Cool.
So
one off.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is the pull request raised. It was originally written by Eric, and I have done a number of changes to it recently to bring it in line, make it pass the tests, make it pass Ivan's review, which was, of course, very important. And good spots, I think, Ivan, there, especially with the is one of versus the one of. Good to have consistency there. So I've made that change to the spec proposal as well as to the GraphQL.js. So I think it's in a good state. One thing that I'd like to know, I think I made a comment at the time, is do we have a particular policy when it comes to error messages? Like, is there something that they should conform to, or like that? I think that was one of the things that needs like validating, but of course the specific wording can be changed after it's merged. I'm just saying that's one of the points that needs looking at. Other than that, what's the process for getting this merged, and would this be something that would only be in 17, or is it something that we might backport to 16, for example? Like, what's the status of that kind of thing?
Yeah, so to simplify, like first thing you need to do, and it will make my life easier, and it's like a mechanism we have. You can ping GraphQL.js reviewers team in reviewer button, and 5 people gets notified. So more feedback. And we also decided, because previously we had like with process, so we decided if like two people from reviewer team green check like with PR, we still have like 2 weeks to get the feedback. And I'm like, actually, like yesterday I discussed it at an agenda and did like quick pass to like reading it diagonally. I want to spend a little bit more time to review it. I see like some stuff missing, and I'm worried. Previously we have like, that's why I'm super particular with introspection field, because previously we have problem with specify by URL. In one version URL was capitalized, another version URL was written as like URL, and it was discrepancy, and what it was like kind of breaking change to change. That's why I'm like what I'm doing during review, and what I ask like Sahej, Yakov, and anybody else to review during review. If you review a spec, PR related to spec, you should read like 2 things in parallel. You should read spec text, specs proposal, and GraphQL.js implementation, to not only have like JavaScript code makes sense, but for it to match like a spec. I think it's super important. But basically answering to your question, Benji, so next step for you is to add like a review team in reviewers, and 2 people, and I will try to also to speed this up, my personal review process. It's just pretty big PR, considering spec changes that you review in 2 PRs at the same time. And answering a question about version 16 versus version 17, if this PR doesn't contain a breaking change, so if you manage to implement one-off without breaking change, and I think this is the case in this particular PR, yeah, it can be backported. One thing I would still ask you to try it, and ask people to try it before backporting it, because if it's like immediately backported and later like we decide to change something either during a spec process or in JavaScript, it would be like very hard, like possible, but it would be a breaking change between version 16 and version 17 without migration path. And we try to avoid in that. So breaking changes are okay, but they should have like migration path between them. So yeah, without breaking change, stuff can be backported. Did I answer both of your questions?
Yeah, that sounds good. The final question, I guess, is do we have like a strategy for canary releases, or is it best if I just publish a fork and we can just substitute that in our dependencies until it gets merged?
So Canary, probably your PR probably is a little bit old. That's why there is no like notification. I think I spent like too much time on it, but basically in all new PRs, you automatically get this command, and I will send it to you in a second. So for example, 1 hour ago, I opened PR and it's have this comment in it. So it's like comments. You can post as comments to create canary releases. You don't need to do fork. You don't need to have like a branch. You just write inside your commit message. You just write GitHub action publish PR on npm. And I will copy paste it here, and I can start it for you.
Who needs? Can anyone do that from a PR, or does it have to be?
Yeah, anybody. Yeah, I spent extra time because we discussed it previously, and specifically for that reason, to unblock people to experiment, and not to have like a bottleneck. I spent a lot of time on making it secure. So it's published on, Trevor.
Do other packages that have peer dependencies respect this, or will you get npm errors for trying to install a canary build like this? I see they're published as like a -alpha, so it may not.
Yeah, so all the scripts are disabled, so nothing execute during install. I specifically like sanitize all scripts or all possible ways to inject scripts. And during installation, it specifically notify you it's experimental, no guarantees, you're using it at your own risk stuff. So currently it's like you can safely install it and you get notified during the install process. I think it's useful too, not to have like people, RFC champions or people want to experiment, not to ping like maintainers and have like and wait like half a day, because like I cannot be 24 hours and other people with commit rights cannot be like available and all the time. And so idea here is like until I have precedent of somebody using it for wrong purpose, let's run this experiment. Because now you need to post a comment, it's clear, first time contributors can execute that. You need something merge into repo to have GitHub action unblocked. I like spend a lot of efforts making it secure. I'm not a security researcher, but yeah, I did all my best to do that. So I would say let's run with it. So
Benji?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Benji, just a quick question. Maybe you could review the one of directive. I think it's at stage 2 now, but does that mean that this PR basically should be merged at this point as long as it passes review? Is that what we're up to?
I'm going to read that from the contributors thing to make sure, but I think so. Yeah, so it may or may not be merged. In order for it to get to stage 2, it may or may not be merged to GraphQL.js, and that is the state which is how it has achieved stage 2, i.e. having a PR was sufficient to reach stage 2.
But it's certainly
by stage 3,
yeah,
it needs to be it either needs to be fully tested and merged in GraphQL.js, or it needs to be like ready to merge for it to advance to stage 3, i.e. it's up to you. We can choose whether or not to merge it. Like that won't stop it advancing to stage 3, but it will make it a lot easier to advance to stage 3 if it does get merged, because it's then easier for everyone to play with it.
And we certainly can merge it for sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then second question, I put in the chat. In terms of backporting it, it does introduce basically a new reserved word in the directive namespace. Is that an issue?
That's an interesting question, and it has come up before in the GraphQL working group proper. And basically, we reserve the right to add directives. We reserve the right to add introspection fields, obviously, because they're reserved with the double underscore, but we do reserve the right to add directives. And I think we actually went to the effort of adding a non-normative note to the spec to suggest that you namespace any directives that you add. Now, I'd have to look that up and actually make sure that we did add that in the end, but I'm pretty sure that that was discussed. So people that are using a short directive like one-off already are kind of going against the recommendation. There is, yes, it is a problem, but you know, it's a shared namespace, so it's a problem anyway.
No, but I don't mean to introduce it. I mean to backport it.
In terms of GraphQL.js versus the spec. So from the point of view of the spec doesn't see introducing it as a breaking change. And then GraphQL.js, that is a more subtle decision.
I mean, again, it's those two roles here.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a reason why you want to backport it? Like, is there a strong reason why you want to backport it?
When is GraphQL 17 likely to go public?
Yeah, we discussed it, and key agreement on that was stream defer.
Yeah, so, I think that makes sense. So my gut feeling for this kind of thing would be like, I would be happy, you know, if GraphQL.js hadn't undergone any things that required major version changes, to push this out in a minor. Because I'm not a big fan of masses and masses of of major version bumps for things that should not be generally breaking. Sure, you may have done something, but like this is very much like the slither, you know, the 0.01% of users potentially. Now, one-off is in a slightly different bucket here, because certain members of the community have decided to go ahead and implement it already in advance of the spec being ready, which is fun. So that may be more challenging. So certainly from that perspective, I think we should weigh it on its own thing. So probably this one shouldn't go back into 16, I think, maybe.
Okay, just to clarify, it like really happened in JavaScript. So like somebody implement one-off as in JavaScript ecosystem. Okay. Yeah, if that happened, I think like a way forward, if we discuss it, if it's not purely theoretical, but potential conflict, test if it's conflict or not. Like maybe it's like implemented in a way that not conflicting. So it's executor, right? Or some other no? Okay. So like if you know,
it's an envelop plugin.
Yeah, but we need to test it. Maybe it's compatible, and if it's the only one use case for it, actually we can, I don't know if it's possible through Google GitHub code search, but it would be ideal to try to craft a query saying, did somebody code a new GraphQL directive with the name one-off? I'm not sure that code search support that, but we can try. We can definitely put one-off and GraphQL directive in the same query and see like if there is any matches. If it's like end up envelope, we can just test it.
I got to say though, I think that when it was added to envelop, like Yuri and the team knew that this is a feature that's being added to GraphQL, right? That's why you can use it before it's ready, that go play with it. Like it was very explicitly said that this is a thing that's coming, but it's not here yet, but now you can use it with envelop. I think it's very obvious that it is an experimental, the envelop version is experimental. So I think we could push it out as a non-breaking change, but it does make things challenging.
Yeah, one thing maybe Uri, if you listen to, because I expect like it can happen to other changes, is if you're doing plugins, just add experimental to a name. So I don't know if it's have right now experimental prefix or not, but yeah. So basically, try to emphasize it's experimental.
Again, the namespacing, it is a best practice for that kind of thing, I think. But who knows? Maybe they've got something in there. I haven't actually looked at it, but maybe it's got something in there that checks to see if there's a one-off directive from GraphQL.js, and if so, it doesn't add itself. That would be a smart workaround.
Yeah, and like before we finish, and if anybody else want to speak up, like one small remark from me about like review process and having like always RFC stages. So one of the process is that during why reference implementation is important is that PR in JavaScript can influence like a spec text, which happened like yesterday. I'm like review a name and figure out that we have a discrepancy in the name and we should maybe change it to is one of to match like other fields in the spec. And I encourage you to do the same. If you review BenchPR and you see a way to improve proposal, like it's better to open like RFC to spec and suggest it there. I think we can suggest a lot of things. I have still have a question about validation. I need to put it there. Is it valid to have one field inside one of or not, and like other things? It's just like before posting a new thing, I need to read like the proposal to see if it's already discussed or not. So yeah, I'm encouraging others to treat PR in GraphQL.js as a source of question and proposals to main spec. That's why I'm actually like thinking it's okay to have like little bit longer review periods of everybody have like this opportunity, because when it's in spec, it's like people read it diagonally a lot of time. Like some people read it carefully, but we have this attitude of spending more time reviewing code, and I think it's beneficial for the whole spec process.
100% agree. It's one of the main reasons I think that Lee made it so that the spec and the reference implementation go step by step, and they must always be sort of together to move to the next stage. Is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Oh, and in answer to your question, yes, one field is perfectly valid on a one-off, and it has been asked before. What would not be valid would be 0 fields, which is currently not allowed. But obviously, there's a lot of people that keep wanting to push the 0 fields as being allowed, and then we would have to add a validation rule for one-off to forbid that for one-off.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add something about one-off discussion because before we finish this topic and this working group? No. Any other important discussion? We actually overrun half an hour by the time. Yeah, because partly we have this heated discussion about non-spec compliant things. Yeah.
Friendly discussion.
Friendly discussion, yeah. hopefully we have a next step for all items for all discussion we had today. Yeah, I think it was very productive meeting. Yeah, feel free to add agenda items to the next one, especially since we have like agendas until the end of the year. And feel free to start any asynchronous discussion or answer, like discuss stuff asynchronously, and see you in next working group in person. And hopefully we'll have even more people then.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.